stable media based in Rotterdam since about 30 years. I won't introduce our archival practice actually, because that will be done tomorrow by David Guerra, who's sitting over there, and he will do it tomorrow morning. I'm your host today for this panel. I will try to guide you through this series of speakers. And the topic, as you know, is content production and selection, what to conserve. I'd like to introduce the panel with a broad introduction on what I would call the context for thinking about archival research and the practice that comes along with it. Since the word archive immediately brings up issues of history and memory, I thought to start from there. The experience and perception of time about history and memory is not an objective phenomenon, even though we might think it is when we look at how we nowadays live under the regime of the rational clock, which is our watch. This also becomes obvious when we look at the fundamental distinction between natural time, where time is internalized, and rational time, which is the clock. And to quote Aurelius Augustinus from the 4th century, he said, "I know what time is as long as nobody asks me about it." And this is probably an experience we all have. The abstraction and rationalization of time in hours, minutes, and seconds, as performed by the clock, had far-reaching consequences in the 19th century, when it became the model for rationalization of production, labor, during the Industrial Revolution. The introduction of the Greenwich time standard was a clear expression of this tendency to submit social, economic, and political life to the rhythm of rational time and to establish a global time standard. Or better said, an economy of time. And actually, the bomb attack on the Royal Observatory in 1894, so it's already a long time ago, by a young French anarchist who accidentally blew himself up in the Greenwich Park a few hundred meters before he reached the Tower of Greenwich, since he had set the clock incorrect. So it's a kind of a drama that's performed there. It shows how the standardization of time was experienced as submitting man and labor to the regime of the clock. And as mentioned, the personal experience and perception of time is not an objective phenomenon following a logical and causal historical timeline, specifically not in our media and technology-saturated society. Timothy Druckley, a media art critic and writer, stated in this context, "In media art, we are confronted by an array of temporalities of the systems that deny the normative flows of representability. Here we are urged not merely to experience banal phenomenal time, but rather to engage in behaviors, assess momentary conditions, interfere with stasis, investigate the instantaneous states of information, probe transitory visibilities, consider indeterminate identities, examine the decay of memory, inspect the flow of the event, and survey the cumulative and relative structures of the archive." In our media-determined realities, we experience time as being malleable. In technical media like cinema, video, radio, the internet, media reinforce our notion of time, which is related to how media are linked to our historical sense of time. They are time machines producing machine time. As cognitive research into the phenomenon of time progresses, it's becoming more and more obvious that time is not an objective quality, which can be measured by chronometers and divided up into seconds and everything beyond. Time very much is a personal and therefore emotional experience, controlled by social rhythms, a process that already starts in the womb. Time is never only natural or only historical. It's never only subjective or only objective. It is always both at the same time. But how can this be embedded in the way we structure our media archives? When we did an interview in the beginning, the question to Mike, I remember, was, has archiving become more complex? And outside, you can understand that archiving indeed has become more complex. Since 10 years, we see approaches in archival thinking that touch on this topic of what is represented in archives and how this relates to the different temporalities that so strongly determine our daily experiences. In contemporary digital archive, we store data objects as autonomous data that have metadata connected to them, thus being able to offer a more dynamic and personal, user-oriented set of, this to get a more, personal related set of data out of the archive by the user. These archives present us with an ever-changing relation between single data objects and thus move away from an historical approach, since they try to contextualize data objects more in the now than in the past. And the concept of the archive is in transformation, which confronts us with questions like, how do we as institutions see the role of our archive? What should it represent? And how should they accordingly be structured? Our understanding of past, present and future is closely linked to the way we organize and process information with electronic media and how we create meaning out of these clusters or clouds that are offered by digital archives. Interesting models and methodologies of collecting, storage and processing information and the creation of meaning can be traced back, you could say, from the Wunderkammer model in the 16th century up to the digital archives with their metadata. And as mentioned, in contemporary archival practices, it is not just the individual data that are being stored in databases, it's about the relationships and correlations between the various data that are now being stored by using this metadata. Metadata, also known as tags, are actually data that describe and categorize other data. Metadata as means for ordering, hierarchizing, streamlining, and evaluating have become increasingly important nowadays as social, political, and economical instruments in an informational sphere that has for a long time been considered as being value-free. So what should be in an archive? You will hear from the different speakers later on that there's different, we call it approaches, depending also on what the institutions, or what the practice of institutions is. In various contemporary reviews, the archive has proved to be a very strong metaphor. The human body has become a genetic archive, now that it has been digitally opened up in the Human Genome Project. Our language is an archive of meanings that can be unlocked by philological methods. It teaches us who we are and where we come from. The unconscious is an archive of all the traumatic and deep experiences that define our identity. Even history has become a database from which facts can be arbitrarily retrieved and now lacks one big unified story. Archives no longer just contain our past for inspection by historians and other researchers. We are permanently living in archives. All the sites we visit on the internet are logged by our search engines and are monitored by mostly illegal spy bots and who know who else. All our shopping is registered in the supermarkets. And on the basis of such archives, the policies of the future are being planned.